the honourable member for Sturgeon River, Parkland.
Here, here, here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to note that I'm rising for my maiden speech, but I will be addressing Bill C-373. To start off with, I'd just like to thank my family for standing behind me with love and support as I underwent this 6-month campaign to be the next Member of Parliament for Sturgeon River, Parkland. I'd like to name my mother, Rebecca Hyde, and my stepfather, Doug Mashaniak. I'd also like to particularly mention my maternal grandparents, Cindy Lou and Graham Hyde, who've always stood behind me. I'd also like to mention my aunt and uncle, Mark and Melissa Harsma, who are also celebrating their 30th wedding anniversary this week, so I'd like to recognize them for that. You know, campaigns, aren't successful unless you have a team behind you. You can have a leader, you can have a member of parliament, somebody who wants to be it, but without the right people standing up with you, you can never get to where you want to go. And so I'd like to thank a few key players from my campaign team, from my extended family. I'd like to thank Murray and Susie Kulak of Stony Plain for their strong support for me. I'd like to thank Fran and Andrew Wolthius, Tim and Julie Milligan, Bill and Deanie Prins, who just received her Canadian citizenship 2 years ago. She moved here from Holland at the age of 4 years old and just became a citizen 2 years ago, raised her family on a farm outside of Edmonton, and a proud Canadian all the way. I'd like to thank my campaign manager, Phil Joannou, who came out in the ending days of my nomination and stayed on to run my campaign, did an excellent job, getting us a strong 78% voter support for the Conservatives in Sturgeon River, Parkland. And you know, I wouldn't have run if I didn't have the support of my mentors, the member for Abbotsford, former Minister of International Trade, who I had the pleasure of and the honour of working for 2 years, and my mentor, the Member of Parliament for St. Albert Edmonton, who also strongly supported and urged me to run in this campaign. And I'd also like to thank the former member for Edmonton St. Albert, John Williams, former Member of Parliament, for being a strong mentor to me and supporting me throughout this campaign. I'd also like to thank some other members, Imelda McLaren for serving as my volunteer coordinator, Scott Merrifield and Andrew Bankovich, who helped out putting the signs up that were needed to win the campaign. And I'd also like to thank a dear mentor of mine, Yvonne Brochu, legend of Spruce Grove, who was a warhorse in the days of Don Getty in Alberta and was there for me to provide the sage advice that's necessary to win a campaign. And finally, just a short story about how I started getting to run. I was interested in running for the seat of Sturgeon River Parkland, but I didn't know when the previous member would resign her seat. And unfortunately, I was on a military exercise in Gagetown, New Brunswick, and I hadn't had access to a phone for 2 weeks, but finally I snuck it out inside of a sleeping bag at 4 a.m. in the morning. And it was July 13th. I remember that day very particularly. And I saw a tweet that indeed the previous member for Sturgeon River Parkland had resigned. And the next morning I talked to my warrant officer, who I'd like to recognize today, Matt Christensen. I said, "Warrant, I want to run to be a member of Parliament." And to his credit, he took me completely seriously. He put it up the chain of command, and I had the complete support of my commanding officer, my corps staff, Captain Hugh Perdon, my commanding officer here with the Governor General's Foot Guards, Lieutenant Colonel Lynham, and my mentor, Major Gray Shanahan. And without that moral support, I don't think I could have done it. Well, with that, I'd like to start into my remarks on the bill in question. Far too often in the news, we hear about another incident or fatality because a driver made a terrible decision to reach for their phone or other device instead of focusing on the road. Distracted driving is a serious problem in my riding and across Canada. The RCMP identifies distracted driving as, I quote, "a form of impaired driving as a driver's judgment is compromised when they are not fully focused on the road," end quote. Talking on the phone, texting, reading, watching videos, and driving fatigued can all be forms of distracted driving. Discussion on this topic is particularly timely, as last week was National Impaired Driving Prevention Week. Distracted driving is similar to impaired driving, Both kill thousands of Canadians, and both require a coordinated social and governmental response. This bill in question would create a national framework to help deter and prevent distracted driving. It also sets out consultation and review and reporting requirements in relation to the frameworks. I'm supportive of this bill, and my Conservative colleagues and I recommend that we make an amendment to include the territories in the wording of the bill, and I think that will make it much stronger. Distraction is a factor in about 4 million vehicle collisions in North America. Every year, including 10% of fatal crashes, 18% of injury-related crashes, and 16% of all police-recorded motor vehicle traffic crashes. Almost half of all people killed in collisions where a teenager was distracted were the teenagers themselves. No text, no tweet, no call, and no Facebook post is worth a life, and we need to hammer this message home. Currently, the provinces and territories are responsible for administering their own driving laws and penalties related to distracted driving. This bill would assist the provinces and territories by constructing a framework to prevent distracted driving. The framework will include information and statistics, creating and implementing public education programs, better understanding the role of driver assistance technology, and sharing best practices between provinces, municipalities, and the federal government. This provides support to Canadians on the front line who are tackling this problem. You know, this is a problem that's particularly egregious amongst teen drivers, although they're not alone to blame. Distraction was a factor in over half of moderate to severe crashes, and almost half of all people killed in those crashes were teens. And part of what makes this so tragic is that this is so avoidable. According to stats from Alberta Transportation, the number of convictions for distracted driving has risen significantly. In Edmonton alone, distracted driving infractions were up 60% in the first quarter of this year. Nearly 90% of these convictions are related to using handheld devices while driving, and about 26% of all collisions involved the use of a phone. This problem can't be solved only by increasing penalties and by increasing law enforcement resources. Ending distracted driving requires a cultural shift. We need to learn to put the device down and drive. Earlier this month, I had the opportunity to participate with Parkland County's chapter of Mothers Against Drunk Driving to announce their 2017 Project Red Ribbon campaign. The campaign provides education on impaired driving and risks. Organizations like MAD exemplify the success in combating the similar problem of impaired driving. Stats suggest that efforts made in the fight against impaired driving have saved over 30,000 Canadian lives. But despite this number, Transport Canada estimates that in the last 30 years, nearly 40,000 alcohol-related fatalities have occurred. Through the work of schools, governments, police forces, and nonprofit organizations, people are hearing the message of the consequences in getting behind the wheel while impaired on drugs and alcohol. It is my hope that this bill will help promote more awareness for the serious issue of distracted driving. We must continue to ensure that the authorities have the adequate tools to stop distracted driving. And more than that, however, as I said, we need to change the culture of constant communication and connectivity. It is acceptable to put the phone down for a while. And in fact, when you're driving, it's the law. More Canadians need to understand that this is a grave issue. Distracted driving can kill. It rips families apart and ruins lives. It's time to stop, think, put the phone down. To conclude, my Conservative colleagues and I support these measures that prevent and deter distracted driving. Thank you.